listening to the Fantasy Fling Podcast. Take a break from the season-long commitment and join us for a Friday fling as we give you the newest and hottest DFS deals, preview the DFS main slate, and take the dreadful walk of shame. Here are your hosts, Brandon and Eric.
Here we are, making a Milli. Welcome back, Eric. Good to have you.
Hey, man. Glad to be back. And
buddy.
I'm reiterating this. So if you watch both shows, you're gonna hear it again. But congratulations to you again on becoming a content creator for DFS Army. Well deserved, well earned. You wrote high quality articles. Otherwise, you would not have become a content creator for them. So congratulations.
Thank you. I appreciate you, and thank you because this show would not have been possible without you, which is kind of, last year what got me started was, I was listening to DFS Army podcasts and, just kind of created the idea of this. And I came to you and I was like, Eric, this is what I want to do for our new podcast, our new thing. And I want to focus on the Milli Maker and kind of make it, a write-up that we turn into a podcast, and we roll the dice every week in the Milli Maker. So thank you, because this wouldn't be possible without you, brother. I appreciate it.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
Yeah. Well, let's get into it. As I mentioned last week, making a Milli, we had a DFS Army longtime subscriber. So I was super excited to join DFS Army because literally week one of doing the Milli Maker review for DFS Army is a DFS Army longtime subscriber took down the Milli Maker, 250 points, 251 points. And, week two, it was kind of crazy because week two was wild too. 284 points to win the Milli Maker in week two. And everything that we saw in 2020 was scoring was down. So it was like 233 points, which from 2021 actually it was 233 total points on average to win the Milli Maker. 2020 was like 243 points. So right now, where we're sitting at is like 267 points. So scoring after 2 weeks is way up. What is that going to mean? I don't know. We'll see if it regresses to the mean, but
usually it does.
Yeah.
It's like there's been some weird. Yeah. Usually it does, but you never know. I don't know. The week one kind of started off slow, but week two picked up for sure as far as touchdowns.
Absolutely. And it's funny because macro level, you see the scoring and you're like, okay, so this is what it used to be. This is what it currently is. This is the new average. But I was listening to Awesemo earlier and he was like, okay, if the field is doing this, this is what I'm going to do. So last week, obviously Tua to Waddle to Hill, which we're about to get into, bringing it back with Andrews. So the field is going to be looking for the big stacks. And he's like, I'm not doing that. That's what the field's going to be doing. That's not what I'm doing. So it just kind of makes you think, what are the pros doing? And one of the reasons that I'm doing the Milli Maker review / MME strategy with DFS Army is I'm trying to think like a pro and get people to think like a pro. So this is their strategy. What led them to playing these players? When the field was doing this, what was their process? What led them to these players? And, are they going to do that next week? If the field reacts this way, how are they reacting? So, it's just like a chess match nonetheless. So speaking of week two, Eric, over at dfsarmy.com, and I tweeted this out and I put this in the chat. So if you're live with us, this is in the chat and you can read this. I do this every week for DFS Army. This is the Milli Maker review that I do. And I do a podcast, also do a write-up, but I also do a podcast where I look into MME strategy. So also follow DFS Army on YouTube if you do not, and be sure to subscribe and hit the notification button so you never miss an episode. But as far as stacking, Eric, last week in the Milli Maker was crazy. So let me share my screen real quick, and we will do this. We'll follow along. So did you look at the winning lineup last week yet, Eric?
I did. I was some players in there that I was really surprised of.
Yeah.
I thought guy I never thought I'd heard of again, like Greg Dortch.
Yeah.
I'm like, what?
Yeah, I know, right?
He showed up on there. We're like, what?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was some players I was surprised of. Yeah.
Recency bias. Sometimes it pays off to continue to play that player, although sometimes it's an overreaction. But what we saw last week, 284 points in the Milli Maker in 2 years of covering it, 2020, 2021, and now to the start of 2022. It's the highest I've ever seen as far as scoring goes. So, and really what led it there was you get a game that's the highest projected game on the slate with a lot of elite players that just absolutely goes off, right? So as far as the stack, you had Tua, Waddle, Tyreek Hill, and a bring back with Mark Andrews. And Andrews being the lowest scoring player by a lot, scored 28 points at 160 total and still averaged 40 points in that stack. So really high scoring. And, what was crazy about it was not only was it a high scoring stack, but it was also like literally the definition of leverage in DFS. So you had and that Miami Baltimore stack, 33% total ownership. But I mean, for example, Derek Carr and Devontae Adams were for 52% total ownership. So to have Tua at 3.5%, Tyreek at 14%, Waddle at 6%, and Mark Andrews at 9% for like 4 players at 33%. It just goes to show like scoring 160 points between the 4 of them and only being 33% owned. It's absolutely incredible. And really what we saw was more in line with what we saw in 2021, 95% total ownership. Pretty crazy.
I'm pretty surprised by that, man. Do you know what the second place team scored? Second highest score was?
Dude, it was crazy. So it was like 15 points higher than second place.
I figured it's gonna blow them out of the water. Seeing this 280, that's crazy.
Yeah.
That's a high score.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. Second place, I think, scored like 269 or something.
I mean, usually the winners, won by like decimals, like small amounts. And this one was like, when I saw that high score, I was like, yeah, he must have won by 15, 20 points.
It was pretty crazy. So week 1 would Rapid Fire XD, DFS Army subscriber, took down the Milli. He won by 4 points. And then, week 2 was like 14 points. It was nuts to see that big of a gap between first and second place. Really cool, man. But it just goes to show when everything hits, it could be awesome. But as far as leverage plays in this lineup, Jaguars D. Now, one thing that was crazy was the Bengals D. They were $2,200 and they were 40% owned. And if you look at the ownership of like a lot of top DFS players, they were like all over the Bengals D, which is crazy to me. But it is what it is. Jaguars D, they actually were one of the top leverage plays because they were 1.8% owned. So, really what we looked at and what we saw in winning Milli Maker lineups is the average defense was 7.5% owned. So there was a couple weeks where it was like 14% owned, but most weeks it was under 10% owned for the average D. And it makes sense. It's a very high variance position. So you're trying to be on the positive side of variance. And it's kind of why you take a low owned D and you hope they smash, because more times than not, the chalk is going to bust when it comes to defense.
I think they were expecting Trubisky to completely kick, not do well.
Yeah. And Nick Chubb, so he was a great leverage play, obviously. There were so many chalky backs. We talked about it on Fantasy Fling, the cash game, kind of look back of week 2. But Christian McCaffrey, 11% owned. He scored 19 points. Gibson was 19% owned, scored 12. Mixon was 15% owned, scored 11. Javonte was 90% owned, scored 9. So when you got a guy like Chubb who was quite low owned and he scored 3 touchdowns, smashed, absolutely smashed. And at basically at running back last week, like if you paid up with the exception of Chubb, like you just were screwed. But Chubb was, under 10% own and scored 30 plus points. So at 7,100, he was a really good play. 4.5x, and then pricing. So obviously, when the points are way up, the fantasy points per dollar per position is going to be high. Last year we saw like you had to at least have one player, but this year, so far it's been multiple players, over 6x. Last year you needed one player. But one thing we continue to see, Eric, that you think about when building your lineups going forward is it's very rare in Milli Maker winning lineups. So you will see a $9,000 player or basically a player between 8,000 to 10,000, which is like max pricing, that is in the Milli Maker winning lineup. So what you will see is a lot of players in the 5 to 7K range. And then, sprinkle in a couple value, 1 or 2 value plays. Obviously, defense, you're going to see anywhere from like 2,000 to like 3,500 kind of on a max, but you will see a Greg Dortch who's like 3,500 who gets 4x. And then really just a lot of people between 5 to 7,000. Seems to be common.
That's a good, it's good to notice. I mean, I'm sure there's other lineups that have, 1 or 2 players that are higher salary, but that's a good observation to kind of note of what the average is, what the median is.
Yeah, and the thing is like you kind of think about it. The reason being is like so many times like you want to have at least 1 to 8 to 9K player in there, and you're trying to hit on these other players, but really a lot of these guys who are in the 5 to 7K range, they have the same ceiling as the 8 to 9K player. They just don't have the same floor, and thus that's reflected in their price. So they might have weeks where they only score 10 points or 8 points or whatever, but they will still go off for 30, like Nick Chubb, for example, because he splits carries with Kareem Hunt, right? So that's why his ceiling, or his floor rather, isn't always as high as, a guy who is not splitting carries with the other running back at the goal line. But Nick Chubb has the type of talent where he can take it to the house on any play, right? So he can still score 3 to 4 touchdowns in a game.
Exactly. I mean, being full PPR, Chubb's a little bit of a risk, but he's a pure running back. He's amazing.
Yeah.
Top 3 for sure. Maybe the best.
Absolutely. Well, Eric, let's get into it. Week 3 of the main slate, the Milli Maker, specifically what we're looking at. You want to give us those Vegas lines?
Yeah, man.
You got those?
I have 10 of them, but I will not go through all 10 because that's just going to bore the hell out of you after we get past the first 4 or 5. The one on the list, number 1, and maybe it's a surprise, maybe it isn't. You have Buffalo, Miami. Buffalo is, they look right now like they're the front runners to. I think they're the projected to win the Super Bowl by odds. But Buffalo, Miami, 53-point spread. Bills are favored. I think a lot of people expect to be a blowout, but you had mentioned there were a lot of injuries on the Bills defense right now, or maybe not, but a few injuries, key injuries, which can make a huge difference. It's like when you take, Watt away from Pittsburgh, that makes a huge difference. One player can truly make a massive difference. 53-point spread on that. Second game is Detroit and Minnesota, which is 52-point, not far behind. I guess it's just a battle of two bad defenses on that. So it's Vikings are favored to win that. Kansas City and Indy. I think sometimes when you look at the Vegas lines, you see certain teams. You see Buffalo, you see Kansas City, see others. Like, there's certain teams that are always going to be almost all the way towards the top, and it's heavily weighted that they're going to score a lot. Maybe the other team won't, but they'll carry their weight. But it's Kansas City and Indianapolis. It's a 50.5-point spread with Kansas City favored. The fourth on there is the Rams and Arizona, so the divisional battle. 48.5-point spread with the Rams being the 3.5-point favorites, and then Philly and Washington, which actually I really want to watch that game. Wentz is one of those guys who can. We've all seen it. He could play really good, and he could also just shit the bed. Maybe I shouldn't go.
And he's had
just for the language, but
let's not get carried away. He's had a soft schedule to start the year.
True. Yeah.
And last week he actually threw 2 passes that should have been intercepted, and they were dropped.
But he also can play really surprisingly well. You know what I mean? He's one of those guys.
Yeah.
He's like, oh, he looks really bad. He maybe
Yeah.
is anyway, but that is a 47.5 point spread, and the Eagles are favored by the 6.5 point favorites. I feel like I think that's one of the games I would for sure bet the over on that one. But those are the top 5. I like that last 5th game a lot. That's the one I want to watch the most. I think of those, just because there's a lot of. I like watching Hurts play. He's fun to play. He's fun to watch play. He's on a hot streak. He looks really good. He's throwing the ball well, running the ball well. Making great decisions on when to go down, when to run the ball, when to not. Looking forward to it. Just to, if anything, just to watch Hurts see what he does.
Absolutely. Yeah, it's exciting. We're gonna get right into it as far as building our lineups after these Vegas lines. Eric, you want to roll the dice on these games?
I will.
We're doing a little different this year. One of the things we looked at with Milli Maker winners is so many times we put a lot of emphasis into the top 5 games, and a lot of times in 2021 it was stacks were built actually more than half the time outside of the top 5 games to win the Milli Maker. So everyone seems to focus on the top games, and more times than not they bust. At least they did in 2021, and specifically, those games end up being chalkier too. So oftentimes it was like the quickest way to fade those games and to get leverage on the field was just not play the top game.
Mm-hmm.
Or if you did play the top game, you took a piece of it, right? As opposed to, taking, like, for example, the top game this week is Josh Allen and, the Bills versus the Dolphins. So to take that top game would have been like, okay, I'm going to do Josh Allen, Stephon Diggs. I'm going to bring it back. Stephon Diggs, then I'm going to do like maybe an Isaiah McKenzie, then I'll bring it back with Waddle. Like that is what most people are going to do. And oftentimes that build failed because there just wasn't enough scoring. So it would be like, okay, maybe you just take like a Waddle / Davis stack and you stack it with another game where you actually like have Jared Goff, for example, and I don't know, Hawkinson, you bring it back with Justin Jefferson, like stuff like that. Like that works more often than not than 2021. Now, as I say that, Eric, I'm sure tomorrow it'll be Josh Allen plus Gabe Davis, plus
it'll absolutely
Isaiah
they're gonna put up 75 points
and
on the
Tyreek
spread.
Killer. Yeah,
it's gonna happen.
Yeah.
And I guess for anybody who's never watched, we if you look at the Vegas lines, I took them from DraftKings Sportsbook, so they may be different on the site you're looking at. Sometimes they vary. From 1 to 10, how we roll the dice, or how we're going to at least create a stack. Maybe not the whole lineup, whatever, but bring back our stack or something related to that. Because, there is an element of luck. You play a guy and he goes off. There's a little bit of element of luck.
Yeah,
there's skill
definitely.
for sure. But that's why we're doing this, is because it's a little bit of luck, and it's just a little bit fun to it's a different element to just throw in. So I will take my 2, and I rolled. That would be 6.
6. Yeah.
I tell you what, it's meant to be. That's the Raiders versus Tennessee Titans game.
Okay. Yeah, Eric's a Raiders fan.
I am.
What
I
was,
can see if anybody's watching. See that right there, right there, right.
Yeah, this is an odd podcast, and we're kind of an odd family because we live in Colorado. I'm a Broncos fan. Eric's a Raiders fan.
I'm the odd one.
So we go back and forth on these things.
Here's the weird part about it, right? I'm a native. I was born in Pueblo, Colorado. I lived here my whole life, except for my 4 years in the Air Force. And I shouldn't be, but I am. I'm a Raiders fan. So it's kind of weird. I'm the black sheep when it comes to that. Apart from that, everything else is pretty regular family. But I'm the black sheep when it comes to football. And it's because of Tecmo Super Bowl. But long story. We'll get to that another time. Anyway, I rolled the 6, which is the Raiders and Titans game. So I already had some players in mind I wanted to start with. So I'm gonna finish my lineup, but I'll be done shortly. So
done. No worries. So we are. Let's see. Contact. I'm gonna walk everyone through my lineup first, since you'll be building yours. So upcoming. Here we go. All right. So I will share my screen and kind of go through my lineup here. All right, so a couple of things I want to go through and kind of show everyone. Now, when I go over to dfsarmy.com, DFS Army, as I talked about, week 1, we had a long-time VIP subscriber, Rapid Fire XD, took down the Milli Maker week 1. So if you guys aren't subscribed to DFS Army, what are you doing? Unless you're like, with Established Saran or Stochastic, like I respect that. They've had their fair share of Milli Maker winners too. That's awesome. But if you do not have a VIP subscription, what are you doing? What are you doing with your life? I'm calling you out right now. In fact, right now, Underdog and DFS Army have teamed up. So if you join Underdog, which they do best ball, they do player props, you can do both of them. If you want to, the best ball season is a little too late, but if you want to get in on player props, you can still do that. They are matching a deposit match right now, 100% up, and you get $150 value. You get a free DFS Army subscription with it. If you don't want to do that, you don't want to do player props, you just want to stick to DFS, that's fine. Go to dfsarmy.com and you can use code FANTASYFLING for 10% off of the VIP subscription. So check that out. But a lot of changes to DFS Army. We now have Yahoo, which is awesome because first off, Yahoo, there's a lot of overlay. There's also not as many sharks, just a softer playing field. And we now have that in our optimizer and the domination station. So you can play you can play FanDuel, you can play Yahoo, you can play DraftKings, you can play all the things, but specifically with the domination station, what is nice with it, we did the back test a lot this past year. And really this is back testing, trying to dial in the settings because the optimizer is only going to do what you set it to do, right? So like you can't just hit optimize and win $1 million. You have to be on the right place and you have to know how to get the optimizer to do exactly what you want it to do. So you go in here and we're changing the ownership. We're capping it out at 100% because we found, back testing that most of the time, about 95% of the time, that is what is going to be the total ownership cap. So you set that up, we look at how many times a running back or a tight end or a wide receiver was in the flex. So you adjust those settings and so on and so forth. You do it to tournament mode, how many unique players you want, how many lineups you want built, certain players that you might be targeting. So you hit an adore on them, you hit a love, you hit a like, so on and so forth. I don't really like Geno Smith, but if you hit a like, so on and so forth. That's
what do you mean you don't like Geno Smith? Come on.
I don't think he's very good. He had one good week, and I watched last week. He's not very good. I've decided he's not very good. Yeah, that's how it goes. So, anyways, you can do this. You can set this up to what you want to do, what you want to build. So, if you want to do 150 Kirk Cousins sacks every which way, you can do that. If you want to MME a tournament with just Kirk Cousins, you can do that, So anyways, what I love the most about the domination station is I go in here and I'm just going to hit fantasy points per dollar and it's going to show the top plays from fantasy points per dollar perspective, specifically with like running backs. I might build my cash lineup this way, or wide receivers, same type of thing. And you can pump by hitting loves or likes or adores, you kind of pump the fantasy points per dollar, the fantasy points projection up. So you get more of them into your lineup, but you can actually say, I want no less than 10% of Dalvin Cook. But I also want no more than like 50% of him. So you can really do what you want with the optimizer. Like it's very customizable. Two things I really like, obviously projections, because if you listen to top DFS pros, they will tell you really it just comes down to projections, your lineup construction for specific contests, which that kind of goes into, is this a cash lineup? Are you playing a tournament of 100 people? Are you playing a tournament of 1,000 people, 10,000 people, 100,000, 200, so on and so forth. So knowing the ownership projections on average for each of those tournaments is very important. And that is what I love about DFS Army, because their ownership projections are legit. So when I see that a guy is going to be 20% owned, I can trust that it's going to be close to that. Now, it'll never be exactly that, but with DFS Army, I know it's going to be accurate. So if I see a guy who's coming in really low owned, for example, I like Herbert, or not necessarily Herbert this week because of his injuries, but Mahomes, for example, 5% owned. Why is nobody playing Mahomes? That's one of the highest projected games on the slate. He's off to an incredible start. So in a contest like the Milli Maker, I'm all about it. This game is 50.5. We got Bills and Dolphins at 53. We got the Lions and the Vikings at 52.5. And this is the third highest game on the slate, and hardly anyone's playing Mahomes, Juju, MDS, a lot of these guys. And you have bring back options. You could do Jonathan Taylor. You could do Michael Pittman. So maybe getting Pittman back, this game is a little more competitive than you think it's going to be. I like it. So if I go over to DraftKings, this is kind of what I'm going with right now with my Milli Maker build. Now you got to get different somehow, some way. J.K. Dobbins, to me, is a guy that I project to be low owned because the news just came out today that he's going to play. He's cheap. He's 5,300. We don't know what his workload is going to be coming off that ACL, but he is going to play. Let's say he gets 15 carries. Let's say he gets some goal line carries. He does not really have to do a whole lot at 5,300. So I like him. And this is the type of play that I want in GPP because we really don't know, his workload. So I'm not playing him in cash. I'm not playing him at small tournaments, but yeah, in GPP, I'll do that. Dameon Pierce, he looked pretty good last week. They said they need to get him even more and more carries. He's going against Chicago. He's in a pretty good matchup overall. So I like him this week, mainly, because of his price. And the wide receivers have been just better plays overall. The running backs have failed us. When we pay up for running backs so far this year, with the exception of Chubb last week, we've been disappointed. So I'm more willing to take some chances on a couple running backs who are lower price and might see that volume, and the talent is there, right? With like a J.K. Dobbins. If this is week 3 and there's no injury, J.K. Dobbins would be probably 6,500, 7,000 at this point. So that's a chance I'm willing to take. Same with Dameon Pierce. I mentioned that Miami and Buffalo game on the Fantasy Fling DFS podcast. I do like it, and I want to take pieces of it. So maybe I'm not necessarily overstacking the game because I'm chasing what happened last week with Miami, but maybe I'm taking a piece of that. So I'm doing a little ping pong with Jalen Waddle and Gabe Davis. Miami, they have a very elite cornerback who's going to probably be covering Stephon Diggs this week. So Gabe Davis is coming back, assuming he plays tomorrow. That's a guy that I like. So I like that little game stack. Just that's what we saw a lot in 2021. So Mahomes, Juju. What we have here is the team stack. That was heavy in 2021. Maybe that game goes off a little bit, but Jonathan Taylor is too high priced. Pittman has a great game, but he doesn't quite get there. So now we just have a Mahomes +1 stack, which actually took down the Milli Maker week 1. Shout out to Rapid Fire XD. And then the other game that I like, DeAndre Swift and Irv Smith. Now, DeAndre is very low owned right now. So he's coming in under 5%. And this is a guy who gets a lot of receptions. And he's also, just from a talent aspect, he's one of the best running backs in the game. So if we look at projections, Swift, 6% ownership. So it's climbed up a little bit, but still pretty low. That's the second highest scoring game on the slate. So I like that. Swift with Irv Smith. Now, Irv Smith got a lot of opportunities last week. He didn't do a whole lot, but at tight end, we don't really need a whole lot if we're being honest. He should have had a 64-yard touchdown that he dropped. He was wide open. He could easily had 20, 30 points last week. So hopefully they'll go back to him. He's pretty low priced. I believe he's 3,100. The tight end position, you punt that. That's how it goes. And Eric, we talked about it earlier. Carson Wentz. He had 2 passes last week. Easily should have been interceptions. Mm-hmm. He started the season. Who did he play week 1?
They played Jags. It was the Jags week 1.
So, and then Detroit last week. It's going to get a little harder here now. Playing Philly this week. Got Jalen Hurts, A.J. Brown, Goddard coming into town. They have a good defense. They got Darius Slay. Things are going to be a little harder. So, and typically, one thing I want to point out is we did see more in 2021 a pay up for defenses. The first couple weeks of the season, we had the Jaguars and the Pittsburgh Steelers, who I think they were like 2,400, so very low price. But if you're assuming it's going to regress to the mean and you're going to see some more pay up options, Philly this week going against Washington is probably more in line with what we saw in 2021.
Yeah, we'll see. We'll see. I mean, Wentz is the probably top 3 quarterback in the league, so I don't know, man. I don't know what you're talking about. Obviously, that's clearly hyperbole, but
yeah,
I don't know. He's one of those guys that he's a gunslinger, man. He likes to just throw that ball, so it's good and bad. It's good for fantasy sometimes, kind of bad it could be, but it's kind of like the old Jameis. It's like, hey, 50-50, or Drew Lock. Oh
yeah,
what was his tweet? Sometimes I throw the ball and I think, oops, or something like that. I don't.
Oh no.
Same type of quarterback.
Yeah.
I have a little bit of overlap with you. There's a few players that we overlap, and he and I don't discuss who we're going to put in our lineups beforehand. It just, obviously there's going to be overlap with almost every team out there at some point. But I rolled the 6, which was the Raiders and Tennessee game. So I am a Raiders fan, but I'm not a homer. I understand there's limitations with the team at times. However, I do see the Tennessee defense looks bad. Their offense looks bad. They just don't look great. They're relying on Henry, but if they're down by 20, 30 points, they can't rely on him to like destroy the fourth quarter like he always does. So anyway, I stacked the game. I have Derek Carr. I expect a big bounce from Devontae Adams, and then I'll have the Raiders defense as well. So I have 3 Raiders players and or team in the lineup. So Carr, Adams, and the Raiders. I also have Dobbins in the lineup as well. It could be it's a dart throw, but he's a stud. And if he comes back and they give him the workload, because if you look at what happened last week, none of the running backs did anything. Mike Davis, Kenyon Drake, Justice Hill, none of them did anything. And if they have a lead and they want to like have a running back they can trust who can get yards, catch the ball, Dobbins is there, and he's cheap. He could get 3 carries. He could get a lot. So who knows? But
we embrace that in GPPs. Yeah. We want the guy coming off an injury who no one wants to play,
right?
Because he may get 15 carries and score twice, and he's $5,300.
And I was also trying to get Kamara in the lineup because he's coming off this similar thing, right? He's like 4% owned, a little more expensive, but I wasn't able to get him in there. I did get Patterson in there, Cordell Patterson. He had a bad game last week, but he's still pretty inexpensive, and we've seen he has a ceiling of 30+ as well. I do have Jalen Waddle also, as you had him as well.
Yeah.
Bateman, I was surprised at how cheap he was and lower ownership than I expected. He's obviously a big play guy, at least, or maybe he's not, but that's how he's shown this year so far as a big play guy.
Yeah.
Jackson seems to throw the ball better. I have Bateman in there. I have the same tight end as you as Irv Smith because he seemed to be targeted a lot, and as mentioned, it could have been way more points than it was.
He's actually happened. Talented,
yeah.
Like you see him, he's open and he's big and physical, and he should score. Like I said, he should have had 20, 30-point game the other night.
If that happened though, we probably would be in our lineups this week. So I guess it happens for a reason. A lot of times people just look at the box score and they don't understand that could have been a big game, and so it's like, hey, that's what we're trying to ride the coattails on.
You got to go right back to him. You got to have a short memory,
Yeah.
and specifically in DFS because
Absolutely. And both
dude,
teams don't have a great defense. I think it's going to be a higher scoring. It's projected to be the second highest scoring game of the week. So, hopefully it does. I hope it does. My flex, I have Christian Kirk. He seems to be still kind of. I think people are sleeping on him a little bit. So I think I was too when he was with the Cardinals. I don't think he shined, but he's so far through 2 weeks, he's looked really good.
Mm-hmm.
And as mentioned, I have the Raiders in the defense. So I have Carr, Dobbins, and Patterson. I have Adams, Waddle, Bateman, Christian Kirk, Irv Smith, and the Raiders. I don't know 100% on my lineup percentage. From what I added, it's about 105 right now, but that could change. It could be off. So I gotta, we'll see what it turns out to be, ownership percentage wise.
Absolutely.
I debated on Jamal Charles and LaDainian Tomlinson and Megatron. Couldn't fit him in the lineup.
Yeah. So if you had all three of those guys, you would be 0% in all three.
Yeah.
So
super contrarian. In there, though. I couldn't find them.
Yeah.
What happened?
Super contrarian. And if John Elway, for example, comes down, he might put him in the captain spot on Sunday night in case he decides to play for a hurt Russell Wilson.
If he's going to be in there, we got to throw Terrell Davis too. Short career, but really good one.
Yeah, real contrarian, Eric. I respect that shit.
I appreciate that.
Yeah. Well, let's go to the next section. Some of studs, stacks, studs, and sleepers. We are obviously there's some stacks you're going to target, and studs are, guys who maybe are chalk, but also could be under-owned. So maybe they're under 10% that week. 5%, especially at the running back position. I'm sure we'll be targeting those guys because they have let you down recently. The Christian McCaffreys, the Derrick Henrys, Delvin Cook. When's the last time we had a ceiling game from one of these guys? So these could potentially be studs that are low owned. And then we'll have your actual, some real sleepers guys who are in the lineup, they're low owned, projected right now, who could very much exceed their value. So a lot of Milli Maker winners, for example, you might have a guy who kind of comes out of nowhere and he's like 4, 5, 6x on his salary. These are the type of guys you need in your lineup to, take down a large field GPP. So, Eric, do you have some guys that you like for stacks to start it out? Do you want to do that?
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. I really like, and it's one of those things where I like Mahomes and MVS. MVS is not very high owned, but we've seen before, if you look back in the past with Rodgers, and whether Mahomes or Rodgers is better, that's opinion, but they're both great quarterbacks. And we've seen MVS put up 30-point games. He's had two massive receptions for 60, 70 yards. He's put up 30-point games. So I do like Mahomes. MVS is obviously that's a stack where MVS is not highly owned, but the guy, he has a skill set, and sometimes once or twice a year, it's just same thing with Deshaun Jackson, those types of guys. They have that skill set where a couple times a year they just will go off. I really like the Mahomes MVS stack on that as well. That's probably. I mean, I know you. Yeah, did you have Juju in your lineup? I know we talked.
Yeah, but it's really when it comes to Mahomes at this point in the season with the pass catchers outside of Travis Kelce, it's like pick right. You can do Juju. You can do MVS, and really, if you're gonna play them, you should probably have some exposure to both of them. For being honest, because at this point it's kind of a toss up. And actually, if you go MVS, that saves you a little bit of money, so you can pay up a little bit.
Yeah, absolutely.
That might change some things for me, in all honesty. So I'll probably switch off.
4,700. He's really inexpensive, but he does have that. I mean, obviously he's not a great player. I don't think he'd have a better career, but he does have those games every few times a year he kills it. Same with I like Kyler Murray and Marquise Brown, because he's that same type of guy where he's got that ability to just put up one big play can almost make like a week type thing. I like to target guys like that, of course, and the I was looking at as well as I apologize. Josh Allen and Gabriel Davis. I think you had Davis in your lineup, but you made a great point about who's going to be covering Diggs, and so sometimes when a player has an amazing game, you expect them to come off in another. They don't have like back-to-back elite games, and usually great players don't have like back-to-back horrible games, and so Diggs may come back to earth. Obviously, Gabriel Davis was out last week, so that made a big difference too. But Allen's expensive, but him and or even just the Bills defense. I don't know. It depends how you feel about Tua. It's a mixed message, right? Like obviously the field's not on him. The Bills have an elite defense, but it just matchup depends on everything. It's a divisional game. It could be a 6-6 game, or it could be, super high scoring like Vegas predicts.
Yeah, it's
divisional
funny
games
because
are always iffy.
Yeah, so my thing was, it's like we're not always chasing. Like we don't want to chase like the past game if the field is on that, because like how are we going to differentiate ourselves? However, when you see that you have the highest projected game on the slate and the field is not on that game, and now the Bills have I don't know how many guys out because of injury, like they're missing how many starters on defense, and you're like, okay, so at what point do we stop fading this game just because it happened last week? There's something to be said for the fact that the Dolphins signed Tyreek Hill. They traded for Tyreek Hill, and they're doing everything they can for Tua to take that next step. And 2 games in, he threw 6 touchdowns and he looked
500 yards.
Yeah, he looked good. And it wasn't even that. Like he had some spin play to throw one of the touchdowns where he spun out of a defender, and I was like, that's some Russell Wilson shit. Like that's some some of these best quarterbacks that we've seen over the past several years. Like that was an elite play. And if everyone's going to be on this game, sure, I'm going to fade it because that's what you do from a large field GPP perspective, looking at DFS. But if really everyone's going to be under 10%, and this game's the highest projected game on the slate, and the Bills have a bunch of starters out on defense, I'm like, you want to attack that game. You want to have some exposure to that game, because last week it was crazy, Eric. If you didn't even have Tua in 100-person tournament, you didn't win that tournament. Like Tua, Waddle, Hill, Stacks were in every tournament that I looked at last week, from 100-person all the way to the Milli Maker 200,000+.
Those were Tecmo Super Bowl numbers.
Yeah, it's nuts.
But
yeah, for me, Stacks, and I wrote about this on Yahoo earlier in the week, was the Goff stack, and really because he's crazy underpriced on Yahoo, so you have to play him really on Yahoo, just because of his pricing. It's just stupid. You could do so many things with your lineup when you have a quarterback who's priced as a backup in the highest projected game on the slate, and he's 10th in scoring, and he has weapons. He has Swift. He has Almon St. Brown. He has TJ Hawkinson. So it's just crazy. So he is consideration for me. Also, what I'm seeing over at DFS Army, he's really not that high owned. So I'm kind of surprised that whole game, as far as a projection standpoint, they're really not that high owned. Obviously, Amron is going to be chalk in cash and whatnot, and he's probably going to garner a lot of ownership just because he's been incredible. That's fair, but there's still other pieces. There's Swift, who's coming in low owned. He's also a pass catching back, so specifically on DraftKings, you can stack Goff and Swift. And same with Hawkinson. Hawkinson's got a lot of opportunities. He's had a lot of target share, actually. Well over, I believe he's 15 to 20% target share at this point. He just hasn't got the touchdowns. So you kind of expect some positive regression to be there. Same thing when we talk about positive regression, Dalvin Cook. How has Dalvin Cook not had at least a 20-point game at this point? Like you said, and I agree with you, he looks good. So you have to have some bring back options with Dalvin Cook. And really, I think you can play Dalvin Cook and DeAndre Swift in the same game, because DeAndre Swift is a pass catching back. So it has never, it's not like it's never happened before. You've had two backs in the same game, specifically when one's a pass catcher on a PPR site like DraftKings. And then also Jefferson or Smith. There's a lot of different ways you can stack that game specifically because of the pricing. Another stack that I like, both the LA teams. So Justin Herbert, he's questionable to play, but it's leaning towards him playing. He's coming in low owned right now. So I like that game against Jacksonville. Jacksonville's a much better team than what we've seen in the past. They look so far through two games. Christian Kirk looks great. Zay Jones, James Robinson is not human. He's back to being just a beast. So there's a lot of stacking options in that game. And if Herbert's going to be low owned, for sure, I'm all in about him. And then Mike Williams, if there's no Keenan Allen, I haven't seen the news today as if for sure if Keenan Allen's going to be playing or not. But when Keenan Allen doesn't play, Mike Williams' target share is high. It's, I believe, about 20% plus. So, and then last week when Herbert got hurt, we saw he start dumping off to Austin Eckler a lot. So Eckler's price with Herbert dumping off to him, I like it. If he doesn't want to stand in there and take some big shots, downfield, take some shots downfield and open himself up to taking shots in the ribs, and he wants to dub off to Austin Eckler, I like Eckler for sure. He's a guy too. He's definitely due for some positive regression, I feel like.
I think it's that injury, you could see how much it hurt him last week. Mm-hmm. I assume, and of course this is called a crutch argument, whatever you want to call it. He's likely going to get rid of the ball fairly quickly. He doesn't. Yeah. If he takes one big shot to those ribs, he might be done. So I imagine, and of course this is just my opinion, that there's going to be a game plan set to get rid of the ball quickly. So as you mentioned, Austin Eckler might be the beneficiary of that. He's not
5% on right now.
I mean, look at him. He scored like 21 touchdowns last year. I mean, it's, the touchdowns are a little hard to gauge, but I don't know. Does he have one this year? Does he even have one? I think he does. Sorry, I apologize if he does. I don't call him scoring a touchdown, but and also the Jags don't have Bourbon Meyer messing the team up, making terrible decisions, punting their punter.
Eckler's got no touchdowns.
Yeah, kicking their punter or kicking their kicker. The team looks better as they should, because the guy they make good decisions.
Yeah. Last one for me, and I'm gonna let you take over. I can't leave without saying this. Joe Burrow and the Bengals. This team was in the Super Bowl last year. Joe Burrow's back. Chase is back. Higgins is back. Joe Mixon, who I like in cash. They're playing the Jets, so they're all low owned. They've had a bad start to the year. Let's not overthink it though. Like
both games came down. They could literally really be 2-0 right now. They're both games came down to the wire. One in overtime where the kicker missed a chip shot. They could. I mean, they're 0-2, but I mean, you look at the context behind it. They could very easily be 2-0 or 1-1. They're not a terrible team. They're just. I saw a stupid article about how. Well, it doesn't matter. Anyway, they're not a bad team.
Absolutely, and I'm gonna go pee real quick, and then I'll let you get to your stacks.
All right.
Well, I had some beer. I'll be right back.
Yeah. I will talk briefly about how the Raiders are the best team. No, I'm just kidding. They're not the best team. He made a lot of good points about those players. I mean, the Jags look better coaching. You design a team around the quarterback rather than designing the quarterback around your team. Obviously, you usually do better. You play with the quarterback strengths. I mean, he talked about some stacks. I mean, I really like Goff as well. It sounds really terrible to say because Goff is not. I don't know, but Amon-Ra St. Brown, he carried over from last year, and that connection. There were a lot of skeptics saying wow, is it because of injuries? Is it because Swift was out? Is it because Hawkins was out? Is this and this and this? That carried over from last year. I think they have a really good connection. I probably should they have breakfast together, just like Stafford and Cup.
Yeah,
they eat meals together. But they have a great connection, and it's hard to deny. I mean, maybe Amon-Ra St. Brown's not the most talented receiver in the league, but man, they have a connection. He finds a way to get open and call it blown coverage or whatever. He seems to make it happen every week. So at some point, it becomes from just being, lucky or blown coverage to just being he's good. I'm not ready to say he's elite, but I think he's a pretty damn good player. The other part we were talking about. Sorry, we were going with Stack still, or did you want to keep? Want to go to some sleepers there?
Yeah, let's go to some studs real quick. Some guys that you like who maybe be chalk or even not chalk, and then we'll go straight into our sleepers after that.
For me,
we'll
the chalkiest player that I like, and I'll make this quick, is the chalkiest player that I like is Dalvin Cook. I'll tell you what, he's got a history against performing really well against the Lions, and one doesn't always mean one, but he hasn't had a great season so far, but he looks great still. He's Dalvin Cook. I think this is the game where he's gonna he's chalk. I know, but man, it's hard for me not to play him in many lineups. He's my number one player. If I could play, he's gonna be up there. He's chalky. There's no question about that. But it's Amon-Ra St. Brown is another one that's chalky that I really like. But as players we mentioned, like I think as a guy who's Brevin Jordan is out. So OJ Howard is the starting tight end. Take that for what you will with being, noodle arm, Davis Mills throwing the ball, but he's the number one tight end. He's basically free. He's like 2,700. He's the starting tight end now. No one to, if you combine their targets last week, it was 7, I think, or 6. But he's a very athletic player. That's what he does. He's like David Njoku. So I think the other guy like I have is Allen Robinson. He's 5,700, and he had a touchdown last week. He hasn't looked amazing, but at some point, I feel like they're going to just take Kupp out of the game, right? And so who's the next in line? Allen Robinson. He was 5,700. He's kind of cheap. They have a divisional matchup where they can score a lot of points, or they couldn't. Depends. Let's talk about but I like Allen Robinson. He's lower priced, but I feel like he hasn't lost it. He's still okay. Maybe not as elite where he used to be, but for his price tag, he could put up some points, especially if they find a way to take Kupp out of the game. He's the guy who's kind of not AJ Dillon. Another one I have. He's 6,000. I know the Bucs probably have the best run defense in the whole league. He actually was on the field more, carried the ball more than Jones last week, Aaron Jones, but didn't score any touchdowns. Aaron Rodgers at this point has his receiving core is awful. He throws the ball, a lot of screens. It could be AJ Dillon's week. He's only 6,000. He's low owned. Kind of like those guys.
Yeah, buddy. Hey, what up, Rich? We got a Dynasty League with Rich. It's Frito Bandit.
Is that Frito Bandit?
Yeah.
Go Raiders, baby.
Yeah.
Raiders. Yeah. Raider Nation. Look, you see it? Wait. Right there. See that, Rich? Right there, baby. Cool. And then there's the five guys on it right
nice. There. I'm being nice. We appreciate you joining the show. So I'll go into my some of my studs that I like. So I'm with you on Dalvin Cook, and this is kind of where season long can really help you in DFS, right? So like if you project these players to have a good season, top 10, top 20, or whatever it is, this is kind of where you look at positive regression. You're like, this guy, no touchdowns. He looks good. Okay, maybe he's going to have like a 3 to 4 touchdown game type stuff. So that's kind of where you look at your studs and think they're due some positive regression. As we mentioned, I like Fournette. He's getting a lot of carries. I certainly like Henry just because he hasn't looked bad. He's been some negative game scripts.
That's the problem, right? He has to, he pounds his fourth quarter. Like that's his bread and butter. And when you're down by 20, it's kind of hard.
It's going to be bad. Yeah, exactly. James Robinson's the guy I like. He's looks really good running the ball. He's coming in as low owned, but he's a stud. It is what it is. That's who he is. So, and Christian McCaffrey is kind of the same thing. No, this is not the best team to run the ball against going against the Saints, but he's a beast. It's DraftKings. He can get a lot of dump offs, and he's coming in low. And so I like him. And Eric, I mentioned it earlier. I didn't have him in my Milli Maker lineup, but Jonathan Taylor, he looked awesome last week.
That's my boy, Blue.
He actually averaged 6 yards a carry. I don't know what they were doing. They had no Michael Pittman, and they just decided to dusty ass Matt Ryan to throw the ball as many times as possible. but the game wasn't even that out of hand early. Like,
No.
give the ball to Jonathan Taylor a bunch of times, and I promise you that game is a lot closer than it ended up being 24-0. So that's a positive game script. If they have any chance of beating the Chiefs, it needs to go through Jonathan Taylor. They need to run the ball. So he's a guy
he's also due. Like, he's had 2 games where he hasn't had. If you look at like previous games, and I know that it's finicky, but
yeah,
like probably in a third of his games throughout the year, he will break a big run, massive run. He's just that type of guy.
Yeah,
I think it's due. It's coming.
Most definitely. Cooper Kupp, that's one of the highest projected games on the slate. Expected to be close. I like that. With Justin Jefferson, we talked about it. That's a high projected game, and he's a beast. There was some things that happened last week. He was open a lot, but primetime Cousins, it is what it is.
I don't even know what to say.
Yeah,
it is.
If you're gonna play, here's
curse.
The thing. This is what I see a lot in top DFS pros builds is you will get one-offs. If you're going to get a one-off, you want a stud and like a positive game script, right? You want a Tyreek Hill. You want a Jamar Chase. Like these guys, for them to go off, it doesn't take much. So these are guys you want to have. You want to have a Tyreek Hill. You want to have a Jamar Chase in your lineup as a one-off. Like you could stomach that. You don't want a guy who's like an average player as a one-off who's going to score you 10 points. You're not going to win the Milli Maker like that. So, guys like A.J. Brown, Waddle, Higgins, who can really go off, of course. And Kelsey, we haven't talked a whole lot about tight ends. Kelsey's a guy. Andrews is a guy. Waller. And Waller would probably be a sleeper this week is 5,800.
Renfro's out.
Yeah, Renfro's out. That target share is condensed. Waller, Adams, guys like that. If you get a Waller who's under 5% owned and he's pretty cheap, 5,800. That's the cheapest we've seen him in a minute. Definitely going to have some exposure to him as far as studs.
I know it hurts you, but
yeah,
good call. I know that drains you a little bit to put Raiders players in your lineups, but I know
Raider Nation.
You can't have bias.
What about Hollins? So I do like Hollins actually.
Mac Hollins?
Hollins, has cash consideration for me just based on his price too. I could see him, kind of taking that Renfro role for sure. K Komet, I don't. The questions here, I'll pull these up. He's
I could see
K Komet, and then what about Hollins?
Oh, I see him now. Okay, thank you.
Yeah. So I'm okay with Hollins. I think Hollins, because of his price, he's probably playable on all formats. And K Komet.
You mentioned Komet. I will not. I cannot do it. Like when he's only throwing the ball like 15 times a game, if that.
Yeah, it's not enough volume.
I'm out with Cole Komet. I think he's talented, but the wrong quarterback.
He's gotten targets. Yeah, that's not nearly enough. One target last week. No,
you do with one target. It'd be a 65-yard touchdown.
Yeah, I won't play him at all. I have no exposure. None.
I'm there with you. I'm out on
none.
Him. I think he's a great player. I think he's a great tight end. But I'm out.
And I hate this. No Raider Nation.
Yes.
No Raider Nation.
Hey, podcast. Rich, you see this, right? You can see this. You see one.
Yeah.
And below that actually is, you can't see him, but.
All right, Eric. So.
Charles. Okay.
Real quick, we're going to get out of here. Keep this right under an hour or about an hour. So a couple, just 2 or 3 guys you like, some sleepers, like 5% or less ownership.
MVS.
Yeah.
I like that. I mentioned him earlier. I like MVS. I think he's low owned and he could go off in any week. We've seen it before in the past. Kamara, I think, is at 4%. If he plays, he's 7,000, but that's the type of guy who, if he's healthy, he'd be at the top towards the JT McCaffrey range.
Mm-hmm.
And last guy I have less than 5% would be OJ Howard. I know that's crazy, but he's the only tight end that's healthy right now. He's shown that he can do it. I mean, he doesn't have a lot of volume, but with the Brevin Jordan being out, it's a shot in the dark. But he's a guy who could. He's a talented. He's like the Njoku type, where he's very athletic and he could put up.
Yeah,
he can score an 80-yard touchdown, make your whole week.
Absolutely. Aaron Jones, I mentioned, you mentioned AJ Dillon, Aaron Jones. These guys are both like 3% or less owned. So yeah, they're a consideration for me. Keenan Allen and Mike Williams are both low owned. Now I assume once the news comes down that's probably going to change, but regardless, with Herbert, if Herbert plays, like you can play both of those guys if they're low owned, like take some shots for sure. Tyler Lockett's played really well recently. He's looked good. Tyler Lockett, DK Metcalf, play one.
DK is a guy who
play
can
both. Yeah.
He could, I mean, they either one, but he could take a slant 70, 80 yards. I mean,
Julio, if he plays, going against Green Bay, no Mike Evans, no Godwin. If Julio plays, like I'm definitely playing some Julio. I would probably, specifically in small tournaments, have a Brady / Julio stack. You don't even necessarily have to bring it back. But if you do bring it back with like an Aaron Jones or AJ Dillon, but in small tournaments, you can just do like 100-person tournaments. You can do like just a Brady Julio stack just to get different. So I like that. Waller. We kind of brushed up on Waller. Oh, Pitts. Pitts is a guy I like this week. He's low priced. He hasn't done shit. He's going against Seattle. He's 4,800, under 5% projected ownership. I could definitely get in on some Pitts this week.
Yeah, I mean he's got the talent. I don't know. Like he lines up as more of a receiver than he does tight end. I think he lines up more as a wide receiver than literally tight end, like the position. So I mean we'll see. I mean I know Drake London has kind of taken share out of. He's really good too, but there's got to be a point where you would assume like he's got that talent where he could really go. The guy to take attention to, maybe it's more of a cash game, but if Josh Jacobs is out, look for
Zamir White,
because
Josh Jacobs had to throw a Raider in there.
I had to throw him in there, man. Come on, he's Jacobs didn't travel with the team for the first 2 days. He recently traveled, but he was sick, so we'll see what happens. But I can't imagine if you don't travel with the team and then show up later. We'll see what happens, but he's someone to keep an eye on.
Yeah,
I wouldn't play Jacobs, but.
I like it, Eric. I don't know how this went so long this week. It'll be shorter next week.
Yes,
but,
apologize everybody. It was my first time back. Kind of blabbered on, so I'll get that fixed. I promise.
We'll dial it in. We had some fun, but fuck yeah, good luck. Good luck in making Milli this week.
You too.
Comment, like, subscribe, share, and subscribe and share for sure. But also, if you are a subscriber, so you never miss when we go live, which we do each and every week, hit the notification button when we go live.
I promise it'll be quicker and more succinct.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, good luck, and we'll see y'all next week. We're out.